Hello, BookTube. Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and I are turning the name of his BookTube channel into a reality. We are making a Mayberry Book Club. It was his idea. We're just sort of making a read-along every single month, a different thing. We started with Brideshead Revisited, and we've moved on this month to Frank Miller's venerated graphic novel, Batman Dark Knight Returns. And since the Dark Knight Returns originally came out as 4 issues, it's lent itself perfectly to a month-long read-along. And this week we are finishing up with part 4 of Batman Dark Knight Returns. The subtitle is Dark Knight Falls. And as you can see from the cover, the pattern of the first 3 issues in this miniseries of Batman taking on some iconic piece of evil, whether it's the villain Two-Face in the first issue to highlight the dualities of Batman's own nature, or whether it's the mutant gang leader in the second issue to reflect the 1980s preoccupation with gangs, or whether it's the Joker in the third issue as sort of the apotheosis of Batman's long battle with his iconic supervillain. And the fact that you're looking at this cover gives you an idea of just how off the rails Frank Miller's imagination is. That as he was writing and conceiving this thing, the ultimate good guy versus bad guy fight that he had in mind was Batman versus Superman, who in all comic books before this series showed up was Batman's good friend. They were best friends. And who is another fighter for right. He is another hero. Now, that might have been a real shock in the first issue of this miniseries, but by issue number 4, we know that Batman is not a hero. At least not in Frank Miller's view, or at least if he is, it's in a view of heroism so warped that we can't follow where Frank Miller goes. One way or another, this is a Batman who is needlessly sadomasochistic. This is a Batman who puts a preteen girl in considerable amounts of danger, leading her into a shooting battle with the Joker and his thugs in issue number 3, among other things. This is a Batman who kills people, who allows himself to be made the head of the mutant gang once he dismembers the previous leader of the gang. He doesn't tell them to disperse. He tells them basically, I might need a private army, so why don't you stick around and worship me? By the time we get to the third issue, this is very much the sort of thing that we would expect. I've mentioned before that Frank Miller, the person, is, well, he's one sneeze guard short of a salad bar, if you know what I mean. He has a very particular, I would say, very warped view of reality. At least when he was writing this, he did. And in his mind, this storyline really does culminate in Batman, the ultimate badass, independent loner, fighting Superman, the ultimate corporate institutionalist lickspittle. But before they fight, in this issue, they do fight in this issue. That cover's not false advertising. But before they fight, in the previous issue, we saw Superman in ground encounters with the U.S. military fighting the forces of communist Russia at a place called Corto Maltese and routing them, destroying their aircraft carriers, destroying their their MiG jets, destroying their men on the ground. In this issue, as he's being congratulated, a U.S. Army guy is in a Jeep with him and says, heck of a police action. Word comes out at the beginning of this issue that, as the president said, he's never named as Ronald Reagan, but it's clearly Ronald Reagan, says, well, those Russians, they seem to be mighty poor losers because they have unleashed a gigantic nuclear bomb, a nuclear missile that is in the air en route to Corto Maltese to destroy it. And the bomb has an electromagnetic pulse involved that will disrupt all electronics, even for the places that it doesn't kill. And Superman realizes this, his super senses detect it, and he immediately flies off to stop the missile. And I was reading this when it first came out in the 1980s, and I was wincing the whole time at the depictions in the third issue of my favorite superhero. And then I realized in this issue that Frank Miller is just going to rewrite anything to suit himself. So Superman gets to this gigantic missile, which is headed for Corto Maltese, and says 20 million people die by fire if I am weak. And I thought, okay, well, I know how this is going to go. I know how this comic book sequence is going to go, because with one pinky, Superman could completely stop the missile in midair, divert it into outer space. It's not going to be any trouble at all. Instead, it's enormous amounts of trouble. He plasters himself in the front of the missile and barely moves it. Barely nudges it off course. And when he does nudge it off course, it still detonates. It doesn't incinerate everybody in the island of Corto Maltese, but it does hit Superman and desiccates him. It desiccates him. It turns him into a corpse. But he's still alive. He's skeletal, but he's still alive. As we are told that he absorbs solar radiation, even from flowers. So he makes the field all around him dead, but it brings him back to power. It brings him back to life. And I read that. I read that when it first came out and thought, A, he could easily have diverted the missile. He could divert 100 missiles. B, that's not how his powers work. Okay? He's not a sun vampire. And C, a nuclear detonation would have no effect on him. Superman is invulnerable. That's what invulnerability means. So this is when I knew that I was dealing with a completely different Superman. And the bomb does let off an electromagnetic pulse that darkens all of Gotham City. It takes out all the electric power and everybody goes crazy. And Batman realizes that he must instantly recover from the injuries that he sustained at the hands of the Joker, where he was shot at point-blank range, knifed in his vitals several times at point-blank range, that he must shrug off those injuries and lead his troops on horseback to make sure that there's no looting and no rioting in Gotham City. I'm not really 100% sure, given that. We see, for instance, when he's recovering from those injuries, he's on the operating table. He's got saline drips, and Alfred is operating on him. Will he live? I think he will. It's touch and go, though. But on the same page, we see that while he is on the operating table, the sons of Batman, the gang, are going nuts on villains all over Gotham City. But that sure looks like Batman. The hands descending on the villain there look like Batman. They're swinging out of the sky. They're not face tattooed gang members like these guys. That looks like Batman. So who that is, I have no idea if this is Batman. But one way or another, Batman decides that he should throw off his injuries and lead his troops to restore order in Gotham City on horseback. And they do. And all seems to be well, and he is teaching the little girl, Robin, he's teaching her how to ride a horse. And she's the picture of joy and happiness while he watches her do that. But then heat flashes out of the sky. Where? Heat vision flashes out of the sky. From high up in the sky, Superman is asking Batman, where? Where shall we meet? Batman seems already to know that they will meet, because he is forming a plan with this guy, who is Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, and who says that he's really looking for a chance for payback to Superman because of the old days. And when he says that, he looks at an empty sleeve, meaning that Superman is supposed to have dismembered Green Arrow at some point or other in service to Ronald Reagan. Whatever. It requires that you take everything about Superman and just throw it out the window. Instead, he's going to be the villain here. Whether it's Bruce Wayne's idea or not, it seems to get official sanction. Because Bruce Wayne prepares himself, he decks himself out in state-of-the-art armor, synthesized green kryptonite, and then goes to Crime Alley, which is the location in Gotham City where his parents were killed when he was a boy. An event that used to have talismanic importance in the origin story of Batman, but in Frank Miller's telling, there's an ancient bat creature that possessed Bruce Wayne before that happened. So would he have bad Batman anyway? No idea. One way or another, when Superman is flying in, he's flying in a contingent of army helicopters that tell him that someone has baffled the area. So if they're going to find Batman, it's going to be up to Superman. And we are told, specifically, Captain, his helmet is off, meaning Batman. I've got a peach of a shot. And the response is, don't think about it, soldier, not till one of them drops. Executive order. So this is a fight that has been sanctioned by the United States government between Superman and Batman. Batman is using the electric grid of Gotham City to power his armor and to give him some sort of a chance against Superman. Of course, it wouldn't. If you watched Matthew's video on this particular installment, then you will have heard him say what, even if you don't have any knowledge of comic books, you'll already know, which is that it wouldn't give him any kind of advantage. Nothing would give him any kind of advantage against Superman in one-on-one physical combat. Obligatory pause for the siren. This confrontation exists solely so that Frank Miller can draw it. So he can draw Batman beating the stuffing out of Superman, who is disoriented with hypersonics and with missiles and with whatnot. And finally, who is dealt the coup de grace by Oliver Queen, who uses his bow in this area that we've been told is restricted by the government. And the government has a complete hands-off order on Superman or Batman, but anybody else to shoot on sight. They don't kill Green Arrow until he manages to fire his arrow and it releases its synthetic green kryptonite, which weakens Superman enough so that Batman can kick the crap out of him and say lines that have become completely iconic from this graphic novel. I want you to remember, Clark, in all the years to come, in your most private moments, I want you to remember my hand at your throat. I want you to remember the one man who beat you. And it's right at that moment that Bruce Wayne's ruse kicks in. He has ingested chemicals that simulate death. He appears to die of a heart attack. And we are told that, what is it? The electromagnetic pulse is completely cleared, and repeating this week's top stories, the spectacular career of the Batman came to a tragic conclusion as the crime fighter suffered a heart attack while battling government troops. No, notice the news is not allowed to mention Superman. He has been identified as 55-year-old billionaire Bruce Wayne, and his death has proven as mysterious as his life. And we cut to the funeral. And a battered Clark Kent is leaving the gravesite when his superhearing detects a heartbeat, resuming. And that the masked figure is Robin, who is worried now that Superman is going to be in on this and want to finish it, but he winks at her. He's in on the joke. He knows that Bruce Wayne is still alive, but he's not going to tell anybody because I guess the assumption is that Bruce Wayne will stay quiet now, that he will be underground in his activities. And it turns out that's literally true because he has taken all of his gang of the Sons of Batman underground to a cave complex where they will do God knows what. He says this will be a good life. I don't see it. But one way or another, when I read this, and then again when I reread it for this read-along, I thought, okay, Superman is flying into the crime alley, which has been cordoned off by U.S. Army troops. He's flying in with those troops, and they are right there. They don't disappear. We know this because they're reporting back on everything that's happening. They say they've got a peach of a shot at an unhelmeted Bruce Wayne. They try to apprehend the Batmobile. They're there. The government troops are there. And they have orders not to interfere until one of them drops, and then one of them does. So Frank Miller finds the allure of that cemetery scene irresistible. So much so that he is ignoring what comes in between, which is called an autopsy, and which cannot be faked. No matter how many chemicals you took before you did this stupid battle with Superman, you wouldn't survive an autopsy. And you would be autopsied, obviously. If the government didn't do it, and the government certainly would, they wouldn't let Batman's body get buried in a Gotham City that is full of thousands of sons of the Batman. They would keep the body in custody or destroy it in private. But even if they did that, the funeral home would embalm the body. Nobody puts a body in a casket without embalming it. Frank Miller doesn't deal with that because it doesn't fit the neat little story that he has here. Only what that story is, I have no idea. No idea whatsoever. I am as confused as Matthew was when you get to the end of this thing. What on earth? This is how this was supposed to go? I myself don't believe it. I don't think Frank Miller had the ending of this story even remotely sketched out in his mind when he did the beginning of it. But one way or another, the ending makes for a singularly unsatisfying reading experience, except it's also iconic. There's just no way around it. This is one of the best-selling graphic novel collections of all time. It has shaped DC continuity, even though it was a future story and a what-if story. It has still shaped that continuity in so many ways. So many ways. And is just largely regarded as the way things are going to go. It's as I mentioned at the beginning of this read-along, future stories, whether it's this or Kingdom Come or X-Men Days of Future Past, whatever it is, if a future story, a hypothetical future story becomes really popular, writers of the present-day continuity comics start to shape things towards it. They start to want to acknowledge it in some way or other. And although in DC Comics they couldn't quite make things this dystopian, John Byrne, the writer and artist who was given the task of reinventing Superman after Crisis on Infinite Earths, does make Superman and Batman enemies right from the beginning. Not a future story. According to him, they're enemies right from the beginning. And that relationship has largely stayed mostly frosty. They've achieved over the decades since then a kind of grudging respect for each other. But it's not the simple best friendship that they had for 40 years before this series came out. When, in reality, as Matthew sort of alludes when he talks about this volume, the concept of Batman wouldn't work for even 5 seconds if the concept of Superman thought he was a villain. It would never happen. One way or another, this miniseries is iconic. That scene of Superman being blasted by lightning is iconic. This moment is iconic. That quote is iconic. And there's no way around that. It's not always the best stuff that becomes iconic. This has achieved a status that changed comic books. It made comics grittier. It made them more Frank Miller-esque. For a long time that was true. And much to comics' detriment, in my opinion, and much to their detriment. This also had one positive effect, which was that it drastically upped the bar on what was considered good comic book art. The artwork throughout here is just virtuoso, just amazing. Every little choice that Frank Miller makes, like for instance, when Superman goes to stop the missile, we get this image. Look at how small he is on the nose of that missile. That is brilliant, just brilliant. And those kinds of little visual notes, I've shown you a lot of them in the course of this read-along. They're all throughout here. And they are really amazing. It's difficult, no matter what you might think about its scripting, it was, for me, difficult to go back from this miniseries to the ongoing monthlies of either Superman or Batman. But I did. And in the meantime, this thing has been reprinted and adapted and collected a million different times. So it was, in a sense, good for Matthew to read it, because it is iconic. Although I don't think he ended up liking it. And I have promised him that I can make it up to him. There is another 4-part Batman miniseries that isn't weak, that he will really love, and it's actually written by Frank Miller, so he's probably going to need some convincing. It's called Batman Year One. All of you who are Batman fans will know it. Batman Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One are two of the most popular Batman collections of all time. Only Batman Year One, I think, is far more controlled. Far less of an anti-fascist nightmare here going on, far less of a hippie, dream fulfillment going on. Sooner or later, once the taste of this is out of Matthew's mouth, we will do Batman Year One, and we'll invite you all along. But in the meantime, the Mayberry Book Club is continuing. In June, we will be reading Homer's Iliad, 6 books at a time. So if you want to join us for that, it won't be this kind of superheroics, but it will still be plenty of superheroics for you to enjoy. So feel free to join us for that. In the meantime, it sounds like an army transport is going by the window. I am now shouting, and I think even with shouting, I still don't think you can hear me. And if there's one army transport, there's going to be lots of others. There's probably been an incursion at the border. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, rather than scream over background noise. But that is Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. If you read along with us, I'm hoping that you found things in it to enjoy. Even in this final issue, even as a Superman fan, I still found things to enjoy. But boy, oh boy, the flaws show. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.